All right, what do you say we get this party started? Right? Woo. Nobody's sick of COVID, right? So we want to spend the day talking about it for sure. But let me introduce to you our esteemed panel. Of course, we have none other than the director of this film, and John Binkowski, right? Next to him. Yeah, he can do that because this is like their entourage here down the front. Lisa Enos Smith, executive producer and partner in crime. Then the guy who wore the guns and the handcuffs, Jason Urbanski, who was the COVID officer.
Ooh.
Right?
Oh, I mean, yay.
And then my longtime friend and partner from the Orlando Film Commission, none other than Lindsay Sandrin, who's the director at the Orlando Film Commission and innovation at the Orlando Economic Partnership. That's a mouthful.
I know, sorry.
But that's okay. So they have prepared a slideshow for you guys to get us started to talk about COVID. So I'm going to turn it right over to John, and you guys take it away.
Oh, great. So, yeah, this will hopefully spur any questions that you might have or answer questions that you might have. So the first thing we want to tell you is that a little bit of a story where Lisa and we were planning to shoot a very much more complicated film. It had a beach scene, a party scene, lots of people, everybody screaming and yelling with masks off. And then we were going to shoot that in April, I think, right, Ben? And that didn't work. So we scrapped everything. We had already committed to our director of photography and 2 of our actors. And then we thought about it some more, and we thought maybe we should try to do something. Why, Lisa? Why? Tell them.
Because none of us were working, and we were tired of being stuck at home.
That's right. And so we thought we would try to do something. So we had in our pocket something that was initially written in 2005, but it was a small cast. It was a small cast of 8 people. Now, of course, it also takes a crew to be able to do this. But the first thing we had to do was find out, okay, if we're going to be COVID compliant, what do we have to do? The first slide I want to show you is the first document that we kind of got our hands on. And I will say that IATSE probably had the most information at that moment of time. And I remember we're talking April, May. Things had just started spinning up. SAG was right in there with them. And so this is just 2 pages of what is a multi-page document that really got into detail about this. And so that's what we started with, right, Jason?
Yeah, absolutely. It was definitely the most extensive of all the information with IATSE.
And part of that was acquiring a COVID compliance officer to be able to oversee our production. Well, again, it's early on in the pandemic, and we don't know any COVID compliance officers, and there's not a lot out there. So we had to actually have Jason, get trained to do it. So.
Yeah.
But we thought of Jason actually because he has a lot of stunt experience, and so leading kind of stunt teams and all that. It's very similar because we're all about injury and risk and how we rehearse and how we train.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew he would be a good person. If we had been doing a stunt film, we may have looked for a medic, somebody like that. But this was more like a family drama. Actually, he could have done the stunt thing. This is not a medic.
So real quick, Jason, can you just give us a brief synopsis of what that training entailed?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, I got my degree in stage management at UCF, so go Knights. But yeah, BFA there, so that definitely helped with the organization side of it, wrangling everybody and figuring out the testing schedules, things like that. But I was very fortunate enough because, like Lisa said, a lot of us didn't have work. I'm a stunt performer with Disney under their equity, and 95% of equity performers were furloughed and then eventually let go. So if it weren't for Lisa, I honestly wouldn't have had a job at the time. So I'm very grateful for that. And when they thought of me, I fit into it because I come from a safety background at Universal with stunts, the safety rep, so that, that drives me in that field. And all it really was taking a COVID compliance officer course. And I had 3 other officers involved in the film with me, and they were Amy and Maya, who are also Lisa's daughters. They were also trained in it, and they were also CCOs. So we worked as a team, and we all kind of figured out our sections. I'm sure we'll get into that. I'm kind of running on. But the course was great. So I took the course, and that was through California, through LA, and it was run by a doctor and a CCO who was in the film industry.
Which is, that CCO did have some experience too. I
Yeah,
mean,
oh
they had
yeah,
just
and
done
that's the
something.
thing is, he was
That's
probably,
hard to
I don't know
find.
if he was the very first, but he had already had some experience, so they were able to share that.
Yeah, and when taking that course, remember, again, this is summertime. We are gearing up for shooting in September, and they're still trying to figure out the pandemic. So there was still a lot of panic, at least in my family, about hand sanitizing and cleaning surfaces and everything. Now, they're saying, well, it's more in the air and not so much the odds of touching it, but it wasn't then. So there was an equal amount of credibility to cleaning things and keeping everything wiped down as it was to making the air compliant as well. And in that regard, Gary Dean, one of the producers who's sitting in the audience, knows that his team had to change out air filters in the house that we shot in. I don't know how many times, once a week, and they're
The super HEPA.
super HEPA, super expensive ones. Okay.
Yeah, the best.
The next thing that we did is that we, as you can see here, we had to submit to SAG-AFTRA our plan based off of the guidance that they gave us. And so I'll let Lisa speak to that, but that's what we did next.
Essentially, it was working with Jason and going through all the documentation, understanding it really well. We were also really lucky during that time that our first AD, Teresa Bowser, took the course as well. And that was probably one of the best things we did as a film, because having someone who's calling the shots is so important. But we had to basically go through and say, here's what we're planning, and do you have any questions? And we followed up with conference calls with the SAG-AFTRA team to make sure we were complying with everything and to have real specific conversations about how we were protecting the actors, because the actors, anyone that is going to be maskless for a scene, for a shot, those are who you're most concerned about, because they're the most exposed. And then all of the crew that might be in contact with them or near them also has to be at that that zone A kind of status where we're really being cautious. And then the compliance people are constantly cleaning surfaces, and we're not sharing anything. We're not touching each other's equipment or water bottles or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It became like a very specific thing. But this was something we had to go through in great detail with SAG-AFTRA, and they were very helpful in helping us get there.
And then, again, this is just 2 pages of what was a multi-page document that we provided to them. I got upset when I read page 2 and it said you had to have good hygiene. I was like, what? I'm a director.
But also, they wanted to know, they did a really thorough job of saying, are there any scenes where actors are closer than each other?
6 feet, yeah.
And so we had to really document all of those moments where in this scene, they're in a car, so they're close to each other. Or this scene, they're all at a table. So we had to really call those out and be really specific about that and get their approval for those shots.
So now, I don't know this, so I'm going to ask the question. Then SAG-AFTRA approved our plan, or did they ask us to adjust anything? I don't know. I was being creative.
Well, yeah, Lisa, all the work that you put in with SAG, I can't even imagine. But I was the fortunate one that just was able to walk SAG around when they came for the site visit. And we were fortunate enough as a cast in a movie to pass with flying colors. We did
Congratulations.
a great job.
Yeah, we had
awesome.
the actors doing Q&A, and one of them was like, oh, we didn't even know they were coming. We could have been shut down. I was like, we knew they were coming. We didn't need you guys to know they were coming. Everybody needed to behave as normal.
Yeah.
The only thing SAG did is they looked at who was in our Zone A, and they challenged us on some of the people. So there were some people, we didn't think both wardrobe people needed to be
And we adjusted.
We addressed it. We brought them into Zone A, and it really was about testing.
Yeah, we actually ended up creating like a tier system, and it might have been confusing to others, but our CCO team knew exactly what we were doing. We had like a Zone A, but then we had 2 tiers within that zone, and then we had a Zone B. Now Zone A, we had a Tier 3, and the 3 actually didn't mean like level of, you know, how close they were. It just meant how many times we were testing them per week.
Yes, and we'll
So-
show us. We'll show.
we'll
a
get
slide
to
on
that later,
For-
but-
for
So
sure.
can I ask real quick?
Yes,
You've
yeah.
used the term Zone A a couple times. Could you explain for our audience a little bit of what that
so,
means?
So Zone A are the people that are coming in close proximity with each other with masks off. Now, usually, so you got your performers. We had 8 in this film. Those 8 performers or the talent would always have their masks off when they were doing a scene. But we'll see in images coming up that during rehearsals and everything else, they were always masked up. And we were always sanitizing, even temp checking at times where it might feel warm in the house or outside. Because remember, we were doing this at the end of summer, you know, so.
And we're turning the air off to get the shot without sound in some cases.
Yeah.
Now, I have to say, I was working on a film at about the same time you are, and I love what SAG does for our actors, but they are the hardest group, especially during COVID. There are so many checklists. Like we had to go through what was the air handling capacity of our air conditioners, and how often were the filters changed, and
Mhm.
all this other stuff. And it was a lot. So I have to credit you, Lisa, for getting all of those things done, because that's quite a bit.
Normally, I would really executive produce. This time, I really was the SAG rep.
Yeah.
I mean, that was my full-time job, was that, because that was quite a bit.
And I felt like every time you overcame a hurdle, they're like, oh no,
There's one more thing.
Yeah.
there's something new now.
Yeah.
Well, we were
This
on,
just
let's
came
say
up.
we were on the same, we had the same objective, which is to get this film successfully shot without anybody.
Well, without anybody
was the- that
getting
was-
sick. Yes.
Awesome.
Before I go to the next slide, I want to let you know that concurrently and at the same time, Gary Dean was working with Lindsay on getting all of the authorizations and permitting and all of the stuff that's necessary for us to be able to get this happening. Now, that's usually, I mean, dealing with SAG too, the problems that we ran into was that this was a pandemic and people were getting furloughed. And that doesn't stop at just, us. That stops with, oh, well, there's somebody from this department of this area of celebration or whatever that usually signs off on this, but they were furloughed and they're not there to sign it. So who's there to sign off on the permitting for the blah, 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 blah. So, and same thing with SAG.
They had laid off, they had to have a lot of layoffs.
We're trying to get a hold of somebody and they said, I'm sorry, you're going to have to, try to reconnect because I've been, furloughed. I mean, so it was really navigating a
You
lot
can
of
see
things.
it was an industry-wide catastrophe.
Yeah, and Linda, I'm sure you can speak more to this, but from that standpoint, there's a lot of people that were missing with all the productions I'm sure you were dealing with.
Yeah, I mean, it happens more often than just when you're in a pandemic. I mean, when someone leaves the city, I don't get notified, and typically film gets left off the list of things that their replacement gets trained on. So it just takes a bit longer, but yeah, we had some fun with that. To be fair. I mean, including myself, I was furloughed. So I know the beginning of the project, I believe you worked with Sheena, and she was also doing 10,000 other things because she was in charge of technically 3 departments at that time, so by herself. So then it got handed off to me when I came back. So yeah, it's fun. You never know what you're going to get from day to day, but we've got it figured out. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, with Renaissance Entertainment, I usually furlough myself every Friday.
I'm furloughed tomorrow as well.
Okay. The next thing we wanted to show you guys is the process that you kind of go through. Okay, you've got your plan, you've got your plan in place and everything. Now we've got to get the cast and crew on board. So this is a portion of an agreement form. Of course, SAG-AFTRA has all of their agreement forms and everything, but this was one that specifically just spoke to being COVID compliant. And then you go through the process of doing as touchless as possible, signing in and to check in, get your temperature checked, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to ask Jason to kind of just talk through that real quick.
Yeah, and I got to give credit to a producer who's not here, Alexa Timon. I got to make sure to do that. That's also my wife. She
Good call.
she was the one who really helped me with all of these type of things. So just to kind of start, this is what we would do for check-ins every day, and my CCO team would help me. For instance, on the ground, we would have markings. Now, we wouldn't do anything permanent because we were in a town, that wouldn't allow that. So we would do chalk markings on the ground. And it's such a little thing, but I love these kind of things. Maya did little hurricanes on the ground. And, and even our QR code, Amy's idea. The QR code, if you look, there's a little hurricane in the middle. But again, touchless, just other ways to go touchless. So people could just come in. We taught a lot of our elder individuals how to use their phone with a QR code. So that was also beneficial. But yeah, you just come in, scan it, and you could check in. It would have our questionnaire on there. We would always double check with everybody. We could check their answers on a database. That was great. Then we also had, we had to do this, that we had everyone sign in the beginning. And then, of course, this was our daily, and we even had some talent, actually it was more crew that would test us to see if we were looking, which wasn't very fun.
And all these were, ultimately delivered to SAG and to any other entity that required it. So we kept track of all that.
And we would have these all over too, so it wasn't like, oh, I couldn't find it. Like,
now we're going to show you a picture of what this looked like because it's pretty sophisticated, okay? Here we go. There it is. There's the table.
Yeah.
Basically folding tables and the QR codes on the table and they temperature check and everything like that.
And our formal wear.
And I don't know if we speak to this. Oh, we do later. So I'll talk about how many times we had to test people because our budget increased significantly because of things like everything took longer to shoot. So what we were planning, when we were planning to do 10 shots in one day, it ended up 5 shots in one day. And also the fact that COVID testing is not cheap, especially the one that we went with. So
yeah, and in the photo you can actually see we're wearing wristbands. I forgot to mention that we had a color-coded wristband thing that we did as well.
Shows you were checked in.
You couldn't be anywhere on this location.
You wouldn't even be allowed into an area if you didn't have that color of wristband because that meant you were in zone A or B.
That's right.
And then everyone had a new mask in the morning, and then we replaced their mask in the afternoon, and we had masks always available on the table so that if the crew were outside working, hot and sweaty, they could always replace.
Yeah, we could always replace with a nice fresh
sanitizer,
one.
touchless sanitizer everywhere.
Now honestly, I gotta say that I pocketed one of the masks and took it home. This one, let you know.
Is that the same one from the?
It's this one, yeah.
So-
It's great.
I have to ask you real quick,
Yeah.
this is all when we're on set. What was happening offset?
That's a good question. You mean before we started shooting, or?
Was this shot in a bubble? Meaning was everybody kind of quarantined together, or
No.
what protocols were there
Good
offset?
question. That's a good question.
That wasn't a requirement from SAG. I
Right.
know if we had had the budget, that's what we wanted to do. But we weren't able to have everybody be. So
Everyone had to be tested, and we went with a rapid test similar to what the NBA used.
Not rapid, PCR.
PCR. I'm
PCR,
sorry, not
yeah.
rapid. PCR. It's the spit one.
Mhm.
Anyway,
With
we'll get into that, but that's what we had to do. Now, initially, we tried to do all of the things you normally do, like a table read and things like that, as touchless as possible. We'll show that. When you do check in, though, this video is fast, so watch it quickly. It happens quickly. But remember, our COVID officers have to test themselves too, and it's like like being at the OK Corral or something like that. Here we go. Here it goes. Dun! Okay, temperature's good. All right, that's it.
Oh man.
All right. So
No, but with the PCR, before everyone arrived on the location, we had everyone tested. So we knew that we had all negative test results before we went on location. And we actually didn't let the crew meet go into the house or anything like that.
right.
We
And-
always had, anytime we were at the house, even before the crew arrived, our COVID compliance officer was there. So we always were supervised at all times. And we honored that because we wanted to be as cautious as possible.
The
And that was
actors, I mean, some people had an 8-hour day, some people had a 10-hour day, some people had a 12-hour day, and the COVID
team.
officers had a 15-hour day because they had to open the place up and they had to close the place up and get it all clean. Here's a picture of the test. So you can kind of talk through that.
Yep.
This particular one wasn't the nasal test. It's very, very accurate, but it's the spit test.
Yeah, it's
very expensive though.
Yeah, it goes off of your RNA sample, and they duplicate that, and then they pull the data from that, trying to find the COVID protein molecules, if I'm saying that absolutely correctly. I might be off. But I try to memorize that as much as possible. But yeah, we went with the sputum sample because a lot of people just didn't want to do the nasal sample. And for those who've done it, it's not very pleasing.
It's not fun.
And what's great about, we went with the company called Phosphorus out of New Jersey, and my wife and I, Alexa, we researched and did some Zoom calls with a few others, and like John said earlier, this is the same type of situation that the NBA was using. It's rather expensive, so we were very grateful again to our producers.
We spent about $40,000 on tests. I mean, to be clear, that's a big budget for a small independent film.
And something that was never needed for a film before,
No,
so to just
but-
add that.
But I was actually really grateful that SAG, after that they required this kind of test, because as we found out, a lot of the rapid tests, a lot of the faster tests would give false negatives and false positives.
Yeah.
In either case, that would have shut us down. So I'm very grateful that we went with a very sensitive test, because we would have been shut down by someone having a false positive.
Yeah, and we had out-of-state talent as well, so we had to make sure to get them their testing, and it was rather, in the long run, once we got used to it, it was pretty simple sending it because it's just a little kit. But then, you know, you have to walk them through it. It's very similar to like a 23andMe or Ancestry.com situation where you're spitting into a tube, you puncture it, mix it up with that fluid. And the Phosphorus location actually does that same type of testing. So they are used to using RNA and DNA samples.
Can you guys just speak to how many times we tested? Because that, you know.
Well, yeah, I'll go over, it touches with the zones again. So zone A, tier 3, would test 3 times a week. So that was our talent and anyone who came in close
Here we go.
proximity.
Here's a slide of,
Oh, yeah.
of the zones.
There you go. You can actually see pretty much, here's our zone A, tier 3, and it's all of our talent. And then John, because he's in close contact as the director, pretty sure, let's see, Ben, are you on there? Yeah, but your brother was because he was the boom op. So you got all those people
Ben and
that
I mean, it was tough for Ben and I, because normally Ben and I are used to being on and off set throughout the day, because we have stuff we're having to do off set. But in that case, when we did come on set, we had to stay back.
Mhm.
We didn't like go into actor areas. We like had
Yeah.
to be very respectful of the fact that we were not the zone A crew.
can't like hang around the monitor. You can't, there's just not a lot of, you got to try to,
So you
prevent
send in
the
a
crowding.
COVID person to ask a question rather than going in yourself, that kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Right, yeah. Yeah, but yeah, we had signage everywhere. You could see some of our signage. I mean, we had at least 3 or 4 of every single one of those just so that you knew it was always there, especially on like, doors into locations.
It's a surreal thing, though. You walk in, and remember, this is like just about every other day. You walk in and you see all these people from Zone A wandering around with a spit cup in their hands, trying to work up some spit, before in the morning, because they can't have any coffee or anything
Go
until
through
that.
the
Yeah,
It's
you,
gotta be a
drain.
half
you have to
hour.
go 30 minutes with no liquids or
Yeah,
food,
yeah.
so we'd always try to catch them right before lunch. Talent like coming off set, trying to get to lunch,
And
as
about
sometimes-
about a week into it,
Yeah.
some of the crews started getting cranky about it. And the really great thing it was awful, but a great thing for us that happened was Batman got shut down.
Yes, the
Yes.
Batman production got shut down.
That was
shut
huge.
down. And now, of course, they're in a mega studio. They were super COVID compliant. Of course, they had a lot more people than we did, so the odds were not in their favor. But the fact that Batman got shut down sent shockwaves through our group, because they knew that if we were to get shut down, that's it, movie over. We can't afford this. This is a self-funded effort. We are not in the situation to be able to pause for 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And then pick back up
And
again.
then right after that happened is when our SAG walkthrough is, so
Yeah.
Yeah,
we're
that's
a
probably
little
very good.
anxious about it. And he even said, the SAG rep that walked through even said, on the way here, I had to stop in Georgia with a company that's not as lucky as you guys, or not as fortunate, because they had to shut down.
So the next thing I want to show is this is the 3rd tier group, and they still had to be tested as well, not as often, but
Right. So like I'm on this list because I wasn't in zone A ever, so if anyone, I think one of our CCOs would go in there for mask changing. And another great idea that Amy came up with that someone should steal for COVID is we would use wine bags.
They were mine wine bags, and I have a lot of wine bags, and they're often like 6-bottle bags. I just want to confess that now.
well done.
Yeah, but she would carry around the wine bags, and then this way we would keep the masks separated from each other because we would want to take the masks off of the talent, but still be able to give them a mask back and not have to keep giving a brand new mask every single time. So at first we had a paper bag theory or method going, and Amy came up with the wine bag one where we put the paper bags into those wine bottle holders. She could carry them around, pull the paper bag out, they could put their mask in, take it out.
So we're not touching any of their
Yeah.
gear. It was the same thing with hand props. There were bins for hand props. So the bins were offered to the talent to pick up their hand props, and then we weren't nobody was handling them, so then they were cleaned in between.
And I was worried about our older cast members, particularly John Amos, just because, you know, it's like, I'm 80 years old, you know, why are you making me put it on and off the mask? But I will say he was a professional.
Very cool.
And so he's, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. You know, as soon as they came up to do their thing, he knew that was the standard operating procedure for this shoot. So that was very, I was happy. Next thing I would like to show with the slideshow here is, this is really exciting. This is the bathroom checklist. We did fortunately have a number of restrooms in this house that we shot in because it was a larger home. But they all had to be cleaned, and it was, we did have one plumbing issue, which was exciting.
Two.
Okay, two.
Gary, is it two?
But you want to, yes, we did, that's right, we did replace an entire toilet.
Exactly.
It didn't
And
have
one
anything to
refrigerator
do with
for-
who was using it. or
One
anything like that.
refrigerator
It's just
breakdown.
there's a crew of, you know, got 45 people using 4 bathrooms.
And so that checklist is as well. The last thing I want to show before we go is just a couple of photos, kind of show you how we did some things as much as possible, you know, Zoom or Skype or whatever, but we did video calls. So when we did read-throughs or table reads, they were, as they have been for everybody.
But also even our costume designer, Enos Farley, the way we bought clothes was much more off the rack, and we'd buy a range of sizes because we knew we weren't going to have a lot of time to do fittings and things in advance. So
And
knowing
she's
that
out
we
of Los
can't do
Angeles. She
hands-on,
works
yeah,
everything
she
out
worked
of Los
remotely.
Angeles. So all of our costume design decisions were being made
Out of there.
there.
We had a team here locally, but yeah.
But this is us covering for John as Patty Bender, one of the other producers. So we're doing the table read there. This is just an example of, you know, the actors have the masks on all the way up until the last minute. This happens to be an audio thing that we're doing. We're doing an audio pickup, but we'll check them, and then at the last second, they remove their masks. Fully, of course, if it's something that we're shooting on film, but, and do the scene, and then instantly the masks go back on, so.
And we didn't have as many makeup touch-ups and that kind of thing as I was expecting with the masks coming on and off.
We thought that was gonna be a real
It
problem,
ended
you
up
know,
not being a
makeup,
problem,
masks,
really.
and things like that. Now, luckily, this is a drama. We weren't doing a horror movie where we got all this
Yeah.
goo on you, so, we were lucky
lucky.
there. This one is just showing that rehearsing was always done in masks whenever we rehearsed action or dialogue or anything. Next is another shot of me pointing, so that shows that I'm really doing my job. Excellent. Jupe Katana, who's there in the white shirt, looking totally confused, did a great job. And so we're rehearsing a scene. We'll rehearse it. Take off your mask and shoot it. Go. And then, of course, the crew was all fully masked. The DP, the ones who were closest, and the DP did a lot of the handheld stuff. They shielded as well as masks.
I will say, if you look up there, I can't tell, does he have a valve? That would be an issue that would come up as valves on masks, and he's actually wearing another mask underneath one of ours. And we'd have to do that a lot, is double check people's masks, because if anyone brought in their own, for one, we'd have to make sure it's sanitary, you know, that it's something that could be either washed and reused, or it's brand new, no valves, and if you are gonna have something with valves, then you have to wear something underneath it, you know,
So
things
some
like that.
really wanted to use the one with valves, so they had to wear something like this
We had a
underneath
UV,
it.
they had a UV box, though, if they wanted to sanitize. It takes
Yeah.
about 5 minutes to sanitize.
We did have a
props,
UV
so-
box, which is a blessing and a curse. It was really cool because you don't have to wash it. It does smell.
Yeah, it does have a
The
a
UV
smell.
stinks.
Not great for a mask.
No, not great. When you put it on, All right. Just another shot of just showing John also rehearsing his scene in mask. And then makeup, the hair and makeup artists have to come in at the last minute, do any touch-ups. So in that particular case, yes, the actors did have to remove their masks and they come in and do a final thing. But again, they're fairly they're masked up nice and tight there.
So I wanted to point out real quick your makeup. This is a SAG thing. Is wearing not just a mask but also the face shield, and you had mentioned that before. I think I also suggested that camera crews that were tight. I don't think you did any dolly work. I did a lot of great. However, who did that handheld work was phenomenal. Like I was watching that
mostly
kitchen
Daniel.
scene, going, "Wow, this
Yeah.
is some amazing handheld." But I also did suggest, I believe, face masks with masks or face shields with masks, like in dolly operation when you have a grip and you have a camera up or anything. Did you guys encounter anything like that where you had to do that?
Yes, and Daniel mostly, when he was doing his handheld stuff and things like that, we didn't do a lot of dolly moves, but he wore the shield.
And we had all of those available, so we would always have everything available for any of the crew, whatever layer of additional protection they wanted also.
Right.
Yes,
Anybody could have
gloves,
had one, yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
I think the toughest one, and I kind of deferred to Ben on this, but was when we were shooting the hurricane sequence with all the water and everything spraying around. These guys are trying to shoot this thing in shields and masks, and of course the water's spraying on top of them, and they're still trying to get the shot. So that was interesting.
I can imagine. One other question I have is, a lot of times with camera crews, you have your camera op, and then you usually have a first and second AC who are changing lenses and things like that.
Correct.
Were there any sanitation protocols when gear was shifting from one operator to another?
Yes, and what we did is we early on had meetings with each team, and they had to come to us with a plan for how they were going to keep everything sanitized. And then we didn't have to, our COVID people didn't have to necessarily be aware of that plan because we're not going to be touching the equipment, but they had a plan and they were following that up. So
Yeah.
that
And
worked out.
that also went to the actors as well, as far as props and things like that. You'll notice that in our movie, there's a lot of sharing of the Dom Perignon bottle, sharing of I don't know what it was. It was some kind of smoking device. I don't know. And in that particular case, we always had to, if you watch the movie now, when she's passing the bottle to Simon, Grammy's passing it, passes it, he puts it down by him because he's got another bottle hidden, and he pulls it up and he
Oh,
drinks
that's
from
very
it.
smart.
Everybody had their own.
Or it was an
individual-
edit. It was an edit choice. So when she hands it over, cut, we're moving it over. So no one ever had to, touch or drink from, obviously. And the most difficult scenes, I think if Alexa was here, she would say, was the food scenes,
For sure, yeah.
because they're having to eat food and everything. How do we prepare this food and keep it safe and separated from everyone? And again, we had to shoot it that way. We're no serving of the food and then eating it. We had to make, time lapse, not time lapse, but time has lapsed, and they
Have
now
finished
have
some
food
of
on
it.
their plates.
Well, and that's another subject as well, because most film sets provide food for actors and crew. Traditionally, a lot of that money was spent and saved by doing buffet style, and that
Right.
is something that I believe we just had to stop doing, right?
That's right.
Yeah, we worked closely with, obviously with Alexa, with the food that was involved in the movie, in the film, but also with craft services with Patty Bender. We worked together, and we were able to figure things out with that, with individual packaging, and like, because everyone wants their coffee in the morning, one person serving it. So
Mhm.
the CCO team would work with craft services in that way. Even on those hot days, we roll around with a cooler with little ice pops. I mean,
Tell
it's
what
an
we
individual
did with
thing.
the meals, because the meals was a big problem, only because we didn't have to space all of our crew out and to have the number of tables, and it's hot and it's outside. We didn't have space to have tables for everybody to eat.
Yeah, so thank you for bringing that up, because one thing I forgot to mention is on Facebook, they started a CCO group that's up to, I think, 1,500 or 15,000 members now, or one of those two. Big gap there. But on Facebook, yeah, so we got some ideas from that, and one of the ideas that we found was that a lot of sets were having their talent or crew go to their cars because they were able to park near their location, and so were we. So a lot of people would go to their car every day on that break, because then not only that, but you can eat alone, you could make phone calls, you could take your mask off, you could have time to de-stress, or if you don't want to be around someone, you get that moment, So a lot of people took that option, or we had tents outside, but no one ever, we try to keep from eating indoors, especially on location, and, so it was good.
Yeah, but our caterer did provide everything.
Oh, yeah, individually packaged.
So you couldn't, you just pick up, here's this prepackaged salad, this prepackaged, and you take it to your car or take it to
Yeah.
to a.
It was bread, it was rolled up, plastic wrapped, everything was where you couldn't.
So, I mean,
touch it.
I would have to say, the meals weren't as great as they typically are when you have the great buffet and everybody's socializing for that hour. That, we really did miss that, but it was safe.
Well, I think everyone, this is my mantra for COVID is we're all in this together, right?
Yeah,
So everyone's got to make compromises. And I guess the sad thing is that you have to go extra expense for all this extra packaging.
Right.
And that does take away from what you can actually offer. It pretty much has to be sandwiches. You're not going to have an omelet
Right.
buffet, ready.
Exactly.
So
Right.
Exactly.
We
and
had dinners, but it was like, usually on a buffet, they add all these extra things so that everybody gets something special, and just, it diminished it a little, but they did a great job. I mean, they did a great job.
And we had hand sanitizing stations everywhere.
Yeah.
We still
In fact,
do.
we had to just make sure they weren't in the shot. It's like, well, get the hand sanitizing station.
But
out
also
of there.
areas where you could wash your hands if you wanted to as well.
Oh, yes, absolutely. This is just a photo of the cast and crew. Again, this was a core cast of 8. There's really only one other person that interacted with them. There's the cab driver in the beginning. Everyone else was on TV or played an anchor or something like that. But it still takes a crew, and so on average we had about 45 people a day working in this house, and so we had to be very, very cautious about how we separated ourselves from the action that was taking place, be able to make moves and things like that, and still be kind to the house. This was a rented house from my neighbors that I've known for 25 years, and didn't want to piss them off, So this is the gang. They got to know each other really, really well, and they consider themselves family afterwards, even though we only shot this in 21 shoot days. So it was pretty much the month of September, a little bit in October. But
Can I just say the one strange thing with that, with wearing masks all the time? There were points where somebody would take off a mask to take a test, and you just had no idea of what their face looked like.
you'd
So
never
it
seen
was
them.
like you'd see their chin and go, I had no idea you look like that. Like, I only know you from here
half
up
the
with a
crew came
mask.
up to me and they're like, Tito looks like,
He looks so different.
it's like he didn't know he had that stash going.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. So that's basically our slideshow. Thank you very much. We can go back to the other image. We just wanted to kind of show you some visuals. So when we answer any other questions that you have,
Yes,
you kind of got
question.
that in your head.
I know there's a question.
all
right
right. Speaking of questions, if you have questions, there's a microphone right at the end of this railing. Please go there because we are streaming this, and we will not hear your question if you do it from your seat as far as the streaming audience. So you'll make your way up to the mics right at the corner here, right by the doors. While we're doing that, Lindsay, I wanted to ask you, Film Florida put out a lot of paperwork with regard to COVID protocols. Full Sail adopted those, IATSE, SAG, a lot of the same things. What was your office, how was your office handling COVID when new companies would come in and want to shoot in the Orlando area?
Yeah, our office is in a little bit of a unique situation because we're not government employees, right? We represent the region. We work with 38 separate jurisdictions that all permit independently from one another. So we really aren't in a place to put in any type of regulations. It's all up to the cities. So what we did, and we took those Film Florida guidelines and sent them to all the cities and the counties and said, hey, this is what we're suggesting productions do. Again, it's not a requirement. And they were all like, okay. I mean, they didn't know what to do either, right? The cities and the counties are like, sure, that looks great. And I will say, I'm just thankful that that our industry is what it is, and we have SAG, and we're just super cautious in general. I don't think that we would have been as successful. I don't think any other industry would have been as successful as we have been, especially here in Florida, as we stayed open. throughout this whole thing. So I just am very appreciative. Each production came to us with their own set of guidelines that at least matched the government mandated minimum, which for the most part was at the beginning 10 feet apart and masks, right? So that's really what the governments wanted to see, but we really couldn't put any type of requirements into place. We would have suggestions, and then typically productions would come back with that and some. So we didn't have any issues with that.
I have to credit you and really the film industry at large, John, your team included. We would have students come back or slowly coming back as early as July, and we had to be very strict with the protocols. The students followed suit. But we only had I don't know what, okay, there we go. Since July, when we started trickling in students, we're about 20% now of our student body coming back to shoot their films. We've only had 2 infections, and none of those spread. So, and I have to say, being on a film shoot is probably one of the safest places you could be during COVID. I mean, it absolutely is. So let's go ahead to questions. We have this gentleman here. Go ahead.
Hey, John, Lisa, nice to see you again.
Hey, Dennis.
Hey, I got a question. What was the echelon? In other words, who was the last person to sign off, like CDC or SAG, or who had the final decision? Say, okay, everything's in check over here. Let's go ahead and do it. And then after you did that, did you have any occasions where you were in the middle of doing something, you had to yell cut because CDC called you and said, hey, there's a change we have to do or something?
For us, the final sign-off was our rep. She had a team of people, but that rep, they had to go through all of our, there was quite a bit of paperwork and information we provided. But once that was bought off and we were okay, with the notice that they could show up at any time and check to make sure we were abiding by it. We didn't have any.
Yeah, David Fasikas was a
Yeah.
great help
Ally.
for us.
Yeah.
But still, the way SAG operates, we need to have a representative that's assigned to us, and that representative was out of Los Angeles, I think. So it was really that person that signed off on, okay, you're good to go on that.
Was OSHA involved at all? Did they get involved in any of that?
OSHA was not involved at all in this particular case.
We were following all the kind of, because there was a lot of testing information coming out at the time and people doing different tests and learning about certain tests not having good reliability. So we were following that from the PCR standpoint to make sure that didn't need to change. Luckily, we got through the month without needing to change those, but there weren't any other real big guidelines. The other thing we were really watching is it was the worst hurricane season ever. I mean, nothing ever touched us, but I mean, we were like watching every day.
They were
There
swirling all around
hurricanes
the
like
state.
dodging us every time. We're like, oh, thank you.
Yeah.
You know, just to add to that, to your question there, you guys were early in the whole COVID thing to do a film. I just have to credit you for just having the balls to do it. You were early. OSHA didn't get involved till way later, and most of their involvement is when someone issues a complaint about noncompliance, and then they might come in and look and see. And mostly facilities like our university would be under that, not so much films, because by the time OSHA got somebody there, you'd be done.
Yeah. And then the question about was there any time where we had to kind of stop something down because of a COVID? I don't know. I defer to some of our
I know our first AD, Teresa Bowser, did stop things. She did stop and like have conversations with certain people.
Well, that's a good point. It was a preemptive strike because Teresa, you can go ahead and explain.
Yeah,
what she did.
I mean, it was. I think I feel sorry for COVID compliance officers on films where they're not supported, where they're kind of like the cops, the bad guys that are going to make it hard for the production to get that shot. Because we're all about getting the right number of shots every day, so we don't run long and we don't have to spend more money. That's a huge deal. But having John and I so concerned about COVID, knowing that we'd be shut down, we'd have to shut down if anyone got sick, if we just couldn't recover. But also, and having our first AD, Teresa Bowser, be a COVID compliance officer as well, we were supported. You were supported. There was not a point where if there was a problem that it wasn't rectified by end of day. Like if there was a situation that arose during the day of a crew member not doing something properly, by the end of the day, we were all on it. And she was about stopping down what we were doing to make it right.
I mean, she even stopped filming at one point just so we could take temp checks,
Yes.
which, people weren't too thrilled with, but it just, it felt hot, and we were going around sanitizing hands, taking temperature checks. Just felt really hot in the area. We took a break, let everybody cool down.
Right.
But that was probably, Dennis, that for me, I didn't have to, stop something down because I saw something wonky. They caught it before then, so I could focus on just what the task at hand was, which was great.
Yeah, it's
And
like
we were lucky because we have really nice COVID people going around saying, your mask doesn't go down under your chin because, see, that's open and there could be things there. And now it's going on your nose. They were just so cute. They had,
I don't think they were that cute to me.
they were so cute that the crew called them sir because they were
Yeah.
wanting to make sure they didn't get in trouble.
All right, we have another question here, sir.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment first. I helped work on the film and we developed the budget together. And at first, we weren't even sure we could do the movie because of everybody was out of work, including our producers and our owners of the film. So we worked hard doing a budget. No one we asked to work on the film turned us down, even though rates were lower, of course, because of monetary concerns over this whole COVID thing. But my question is to Lisa. Lisa, percentage-wise, how much more did COVID add to the budget? 10%, 20%?
I would say with all the supplies plus the testing, it was probably 20%.
I would say probably 60% because I know you're working on the budget for the next film, so cut it 60%. Thank you.
One more question. Jason, any surprises during the filming?
Oh, I mean, yeah, I would say right off the bat, day one, and you assisted me with it. We had one of the crew members. I'd have to contact everyone before the film, and I didn't know a lot of these people. I wasn't in the film industry as long, or working with Renaissance even. So some people telling adults what to do isn't always the easiest. And I'd never want to use the term babysitting, but in a sense, it was that in the beginning. But one of the instances that really sticks out is day one, we had someone show up who may had been in contact with COVID. In fact, we do know that they were in the same vicinity with a house member that had COVID, but didn't know when they contracted COVID. And I literally
Luckily,
had
it
to.
was outside.
Yeah, it was
At
outside.
arrival where everybody
and I
spread
was able
out.
to see this person before they
Oh.
got even near anybody. Kept them at a distance, but had to
Send them
very
home.
respectfully
home.
ask them to leave and ask why they were here because I told them not to be there. But so that was definitely, it kind of was like, when a guy goes in a football game, they have that first hit, and it's like, oh, now I'm playing football. It was like, yep, now
I
I'm the
think the
COVID
other
officer.
thing was just certain deliveries. So like we would have, when we knew we were going to have the hurricane damage scene, we had all this plants and everything that were going to be used. And when those delivery people came, they just started walking in. It was like,
It's like, whoa,
No.
whoa, 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 yeah,
No, no,
close
no.
set,
so we,
Yeah.
like for a drone operator and other people that we knew were coming, the Ritter fan guys, the
Yeah.
water people, when we knew people were coming on, they had to be tested beforehand. We had to have a negative test. But a couple of things like those delivery people caught us off guard. And
Yeah.
luckily we had enough people watching and caught them.
Or even people who weren't, like, we have to get you tested like today or tomorrow, or you can't do it. Well, I can't make it. So I would drive out to our drone op, and meet him out wherever he lived to get that done, while my other two CCOs ran the show, and that's what we did as a team, and we would fill in where we needed to each. It was great. It was a great experience in the end. With everything, you look back and there was a lot of stress involved, but at the same time, that was our goal as a team, was to get us through this successfully, and that's
And
what we did.
congratulations, you guys did
So,
it. You
yeah.
kept us safe through,
Yeah,
through
I mean-
the four weeks of shooting.
And honestly,
Yeah.
it sounds cheesy, but I really wouldn't do it with anyone else than these two girls, because they're easy to work with, and like you were saying earlier, it's probably, people taking stuff from me is a little different than taking direction from these two. I'd be like, hey, can you two
Well, I
go
can-
tell
I
Fred?
can say though, since they took the COVID course, they have bossed me around quite a bit. So I'm
Well,
like under
I think
constant
before
observance.
production, didn't they call you out once you sneezed or something?
Anything
or-
I do, they're like,
They're like,
Mom, no.
I don't know if you can do this movie.
But they've kept
That's-
us safe, and for college girls, they've been very safe this whole time because of the education they got taking that class and doing this work. So
Yeah.
I'm proud of them.
So now we'd like to give you, good job, yeah.
For real.
Good job.
I'd like to give some scoop, because that's what you really want. You want to know the scoop. But we'll go with the question first, then I'll give you some scoop.
Hey, obviously you've met me already. I just wanted to ask a quick question for sort of everyone here. Full Sail has students working on films constantly and new students enrolling. And in Zion, we have our Central Florida Film Slam, and we're going to be accepting, submissions for the 2022 festival even in just a few months. And so we love the idea of films being made in Orlando and Central Florida. So my question to you all is, for people who are still trying to work on films or even start films right now, using your guidance as an example, you had some really great samples of forms and outlines for procedure on your slideshow there. What are some resources and quick things that they might be able to go to? Maybe it's a website or an individual. I know Lindsay's probably one of them, but what are the best things for people to look for and reach out to if they're trying to make a movie during COVID?
Well, one thing is, don't be afraid to reach out to the production company that did it. David Makes Man, shooting, they reached out. They said, look, and they actually looked at us as an example of, we can do this because they can do it. But if they had a question, or if they wanted anything from us, or if anyone was doing something and they wanted a copy of something, I think all production companies are actually quite willing to help each other, particularly here in Florida, because we already have kind of one strike against us, as opposed to Georgia or other places, because we don't have the incentive plans that a lot of other states do. So anything we can do to help to make it easier for somebody, we always help. But there are other ways you can.
Oh, no, I was going to actually say the same thing. I mean, it sounds weird to direct message someone, but I'm very communicative, if that's the right word. And yeah, I would say contact us, but also there's a lot of resources out there. Definitely the Facebook group is a big one. That CCO one, I still monitor that because there's so much happening in New York and California and changes. It's just kind of cool because the entertainment industry, I feel like, is always kind of in the know, and you can kind of see the trend of where things are going. And even in the theme park industry, you could see it's just starting to build. Like, you could feel the energy coming back, so to speak. So if you were getting into the film industry now, I think now is a great time to do it.
And honestly, we talk about COVID, but if COVID is over and we're not required to wear masks, I think on our next production, if someone has a cold, if someone's not well, I want to mandate hand sanitizer. I want to mandate wear a mask. We work in Asia quite a bit, and I really appreciate that you see people. I just have a cough today, so I'm wearing this mask. I think we've had other productions where half of our crew got wiped out for a couple of days because of a flu that kind of went through. So I think that would be a good way to go forward.
Yeah.
I think too, because you had mentioned Full Sail, Film Florida was great. They published stuff right away. IATSE, any of the unions. Most of these films you're talking about probably aren't going to be with SAG actors. They're the most rigorous, so it doesn't hurt to check what they do because they really are very rigorous about it. And then the piece of advice I would give is to really think about what you're doing exactly and where you're doing it, because there's a lot of protocols out there, but no protocols satisfies every situation. Like you mentioned, delivery people coming. I have to deal with 18-year-olds who haven't been vaccinated yet and 30 and 40-year-olds who are their teachers, trying to get them in a space together and everyone feels safe, So I can't control what the students do outside. So last shoot I worked in December, we bubbled that shoot and we still had people get COVID. So think about where you are and really do what you can to protect that environment and space. And you guys made modifications to the script. I see that happening a lot of times. We have to make modifications. If we have 2 actors in a scene, it's great to do a 2-shot, but if they're 6 feet, if they're 6 feet apart, it's not a great shot. So we have to kind of figure out how to do that. So changing your shot list and making that COVID compliant, there's a lot of little details that really hinge on what it is exactly you're shooting.
And I would say, just for reference, the Film Florida website is filmflorida.org. It's just a great resource in general. But wherever you're filming, just reach out to the film commission. Whether it's here, whether it's me that you reach out to, or Palm Beach or Miami, just reach out because they might have specific resources in their jurisdiction as well. So just use, especially in Florida, it seems like the film commissions typically go a little bit above and beyond what you might find in Georgia or somewhere else. And we also all work really well together. I think in general, the production community in the state of Florida really they operate off of a Florida first type of situation where they're not trying to hoard everything. So we all try and work together and help everyone as much as we can, like wherever you're filming, it doesn't matter.
Now, I would just add one last thing. I don't care how big or small your shoot is, you really should have a COVID compliance officer, because COVID has been so politicized, and you walk down the street and someone's not wearing a mask, someone is wearing a mask. Some have political ties to why they do or don't. You don't want to deal with that. When you have a COVID officer, it's just that's the person making the rules, and that's the person enforcing the rules, and the rules are the rules. And done with it. It doesn't matter why you want to wear one or why you don't. These are the rules. All right, we have like 2 minutes left.
Yeah, I will say there's one thing we haven't really touched on that I just thought of is another thing that a CCO deals with, and I definitely feel like our team dealt with, is just the anxieties of every individual.
Yeah.
I didn't really touch on that, and that's one thing. It's not really, what Ben's question was, but I started thinking about it. You got to think of also, like, let's say someone has a child at home with something that, like lupus or whatever, or someone has a heart condition. These are things that you might not necessarily know, and they don't have to give you that information, but they're dealing with on their own. So that's one thing I would say that I started to realize, or we would discuss more, because you start to understand them better, and it does take communication. So there was times we were doing checks, and maybe it was because of the heat, but it's also because maybe someone's having a moment where they're like, I don't feel comfortable right now, and I want everyone to be checked, or I need to step out and remove myself. So there was those moments too that I would say were involved.
I think so. I don't think anyone's going to kill us for it. Yeah, sure. Let's go for one more question.
Hi. So you were talking about all the COVID precautions that have been put in place for filming, obviously because of the coronavirus pandemic. How long do you think these precautions will remain in place? Do you think it's going to be a permanent fixture of film productions? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think even without COVID, I want to see some level, not to the extent of COVID, but some level of protection for the cast and crew, because we do have you can have a big atrophy rate of if someone gets sick, especially like a flu or a bad cold or a bad cough goes through, that can impact your cast and crew.
Yeah, we've lost
people
you know
and
how
had to
it flows
replace.
through everybody, and if you're in the middle of production, so the idea of masking and to some extent, lots of hand washing and things like that, we're probably going to stick with that. One thing I wanted to scoop you on real quick was that John Amos was not our first choice to play Grandpa, because we thought, heck, it's COVID, this guy's never going to do this. So we went with another guy, and he called us and said, I apologize, but I've had too many people close to me pass away, and I'm going to have to pass. And so we were actually kind of forced to go back to John and make the ask, and luckily he agreed. We should have gone with our first instinct, was like, let's just go with it, don't chicken out or anything. But it was actually because of COVID that we went back to asking John. So we never knew. There was also another person that we were interested in the cast that passed, again, because of COVID. So we did have to deal with it that way. But John was our first choice, but then we chickened out, and then he's our second choice. So.
That's really cool. I think too, you're going to see the film industry adopt a lot of this and keep going with it. But you have to look, the film industry isn't just the production side, it's also the output side, and that's different because their money is putting people in theater seats. So that's where I think we as a public have to be a little more careful on our own, because I think Jason said it, you're seeing things open, Universal, Disney, all those things. So I just want to, last word, take care of yourselves, okay? I think the film industry's got this pretty much buttoned up, but we need to do our part on the outside as well. Let's give a big hand to our panel. Thank you so much.
Thank
And from the Enzion Full Sail University, thank you those online attending, and we really appreciate you. Stay safe.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank